Hello. Presented here is an easy, smooth Logic Pro workflow for any multi-instrument hobbyist studio. Purpose is to be ready to immediately record upon walking in the studio and making it easy to save and clean up. This is accomplished using a customized template and a particular workflow approach. I'm your host, Jamie Zachary Fox, and described here is one unique studio. Perhaps some of these notions can be helpful for you. The studio has a keyboard connected by USB, a Thunderbolt audio interface, a USB-connected guitar processor, and various mics for all those wonderful things that microphones do. A dedicated desktop is used as a dashboard. It has 4 key windows: an audio MIDI audio window, the audio MIDI device window, a terminal for resetting the Mac audio, and a file browser. Set up voice-activated home automation using smart plugs to turn your hardware on and off. Foreman, turn the hardware on, which then turns on the audio interface, the guitar processor, studio monitors, various lamps. Now inspect the audio window. The Montage Helix and Element 88 are ready. Select an aggregate device. Note the plus sign in the lower left of the window. That's how to create one. Note each of the aggregate components. And then see that the input and output audio channels are all color-coded per device. Note that the MIDI devices are operating. Next, create a macOS shortcut to launch your underlying apps. For me, that's launch Helix HX Edit, launch Apogee Control, and then launch Logic with its own default template. Here's what's at your fingertips. I use a trackpad, so sweeping up with 4 fingers reveals everything on this desktop. Their 4 dashboard windows are there, along with HX Edit and the Apogee apps, and 3 Logic Pro windows, Tracks, Mixer, and Score. They're all set up as Screen Set 1 on Logic Pro. Notice the window layout. Logic Pro Tracks in the foreground, Mixer in the background and lower with visible channel strips, Score hidden. Only slivers of other apps are visible. For HX Edit, a glance reveals connectivity. For the Apogee Control, output sound meters and gain control are visible and accessible. Switching to other apps is easy. Tap on Apogee Control, bring it to the front. 2 inputs are ready, one for a mic and another for a guitar, but now they're muted as they're typically not used immediately. Similarly, tap on the exposed status bar of HX Edit, bringing that app to the front. Select the desired preset. Then return to Logic Pro by tapping on the track window header. After all that preamble, it's nearly time to record. This default template is designed for the majority of initial recordings. It has sufficient plugins that if a scratch session warrants, it can become edited with effects quickly. More on that later. With this default template, upon launch, it's ready to record from the keyboard. It will record an audio track and 4 MIDI tracks. Think keyboard splits, multiple zones, and so on. Then quickly resets for a guitar. Okay, imagine you walked into your studio, turned it all on, it's time to record. Note the blue button to the right of the control bar display. This shows that the sync between Logic and the keyboard is active. With the sync on, then tap record and arming it, and then the play button to begin recording. I often use Logic Remote on my phone to control this from the keyboard music stand. Note that Logic Pro is recording on multiple channels. Imagine it's recording whatever you would be recording, and when you're done, stop recording. To simplify saving and handling files, I do the following. The file is always named in a simple month-day manner. For example, 5-15 for May 15th, and so on. The file is always saved to an alias of a folder name for the current year, Recordings 2023. The folder name starts with underscores so that it rises to the top of the list. Typically, if there's just a date, it denotes that a keyboard recording was saved. In contrast, for a guitar recording, I use the date and the letters GTR to identify guitar, or FL for flute, VOC for singing, and NAR for narration. When it's time to record a guitar, disarm the keyboard channels and turn off those tracks. Select the guitar track, arming it. As a final check, Have the control bar set up with a tuner switch. Check your tuning. When you're happy with that, arm Logic Pro to record. Tap play to begin recording. Play what you want. Stop when you want. Save by the method previously described. It's also useful to create a macOS shortcut to stop the studio and have an accompanying voice command to hardware shut off. Turn out the lights, head on. Every studio naturally would have its own unique template, suited to the available instruments, devices, their arrangement, and typical use. This is my current default template. It's designed to be good enough for most initial sessions. It doesn't go overboard. Using track stacks, groups of instruments or channels are available. Here, stacks are percussion, montage audio, separate MIDI tracks, select Logic Pro instruments, guitar inputs for the Helix and Element 88, microphone inputs, a set of simple audio-MIDI track pairs for the keyboard, and one lone track with a montage transfer utility called Montage Connect. Remember, this is the collapsed view of the default template, not the expanded one that's ready to record loaded at startup. Now a closer look at the perk stack. It holds a drummer track, a drum kit designer track, and a drum synth with percussive voices. Selecting Bluebird, tap on the plus sign, creating the MIDI region. You can drag it out, making multiple measures. You now have a drum track ready to go. Hidden tracks are useful. A montage performance can hold many tracks, 8 being common. Typically I use 4, so they're kept visible. Yet I have another 4 at the ready, each correctly assigned to its specific MIDI channel, but they're hidden. When they're needed, they're available at a tap. Otherwise, they're kept hidden, reducing visual clutter. Logic Pro has oodles of wonderful sounds. The Logic MIDI stack contains 4 substacks, collection of basses, comps, leads, or pads. Note that each stack uses a particular character to begin to catch the eye, and also the initial of the instrument. This simplifies arranging down the road, as tracks can be moved around and not lose their context. The basses substack contains 3 instruments, an electric bass, a synth bass, and an acoustic upright. When I walk into the studio, I probably don't know which bass I'm going to use, but in all likelihood, one of these 3 is a good place to get going. The guitars get more complicated. Recording is from multiple inputs across different devices. 3 identical tracks take input from the Helix. Input from the AD interface goes to 3 tracks. Each track, though, has different plugins or plug-in settings, providing clean, crunch, or distortion. And other times, guitars are just mic'd. Sometimes connections go awry. The dashboard simplifies double-checking channel assignments. Using mic as an example, check if its input listed in Logic Pro matches the audio channel on the hardware, 17 and 17. Yep, that's what we want. After a while, you may want to modify your default template. Here's an example. Perhaps instead of a guitar, it's more likely you would want a pad. Make sure no guitar tracks are record armed. Go to the Logic Pad substack, pick one of your favorite pads that you've collected over time, make your selection, or you could open the library and just go wild. Now, before you save the template, decide how you want Logic Pro to launch. Select the most likely channel that will be recorded into. Here, that's a montage audio track. If you wanted the pad, then choose that so it's the first thing you'll expect upon launching your studio. Now it's time to save your template. Select File, Save as Template. I use a specific default file name always. It's _T. With a space and underscore, it shows up atop most lists so it can be found immediately. Logic Pro will ask if you want to replace the file. Of course, say yes. If you don't yet have a default template set, navigate to Logic Pro, Settings, General, then into Project Handling. Set the startup action to create new project using default template. Then set the default template to your preferred file. In this case, _T. Now you're ready to go. The current location of the mixer window fully displays anything muted, solid, or clipped at a glance. Bring it full screen, examine the layout. First note that all the montage MIDI channels are external instruments. Also note, many plugins, especially EQ, compression, and noise gates, are available on channel strips but are presently inactive. That's because until that track gets used, those items will remain off and thus are not loaded, choking memory when Logic Pro launches. Use your template's notepad function to keep release notes and dates reflecting the most recent template modifications. It's also useful to list items here to copy-paste into a track or an event window, such as MIDI program changes or other control directives, so it doesn't need to be fully retyped every time. Shown here are event window excerpts of various MIDI controls for the devices now in use. Now for a few things behind the scenes. Recall that the initial recordings were saved into an alias of a specific folder. In the current example, that's _recordings 2023. Here's how to set that up. Open two Finder windows, placed side by side. In one window, navigate to your primary work folder. Mine is named Sketches. In the other window, navigate to Music/Logic. Create in the first folder, your main folder, something like _recordings 2023. Now select that folder. Press Option and Command and then drag that folder into Music Logic in the other window, creating the alias when you release the keys. Now, when Logic Pro goes to save, that alias will appear at the top of the list. Every quarter, all those recordings are archived together and labeled by the period. Most likely, anything worthwhile has already been saved and extracted to somewhere else. And that's it. Thank you for viewing. Hopefully, some of the notions here will speed up your workflow and make it easier to get going when you first turn on your gear. I'm your host, Jamie Zachary Fox.